Welcome to Brown's Furniture. I think today we're going to have a little tour of our physical plant, an introduction to some of our staff, and we're going to try and help you do some planning for your home and your decorating needs.
Hi, my name's Mary. I'm one of the design consultants here at Brown's Furniture. I graduated from the University of Idaho in clothing, textiles, and home design, and today I'm going to walk you through what I do here at Brown's Furniture as one of the consultants, how to make your furniture purchases, carpet purchasing, and how to make your home a home for you. How we approach is we like to greet the customer and hopefully make them feel comfortable. We don't like to follow them around. We want to, they may say that they're just looking, that's great, but we keep checking back. Maybe they stop at a piece of furniture, or maybe they're with a friend and they're showing some interest. I listen for that. I listen to see if they may have a question. We just try to make the customer feel at ease and really see what they want. Most people coming into the store are looking for something. They may just say that they're just browsing, but when you go into a furniture store, you have something in mind. There is some future project. And after a sale, I even ask, well, what is your next project going to be? And that leads you into the future there. So you just need to listen. You need to find out what the customer is really wanting. And when they're just looking, we like to check back, and hopefully at our store, we make you feel comfortable. Service is a very important part of the business. If you don't service your customers after the sale, you will not have the customers come back to your store. And we're a small store and a small community, and Brown's takes pride in the service. Even if something doesn't have a warranty, within a reasonable amount of time, Brown's is always stuck behind you, and that's what brings people back to our store. Interior designers are not offered through all stores. When you're picking your furniture store, a lot of times they're just salespeople, or you have to hire your interior design separately. And so that's kind of a unique feature that we have here at Brown's Furniture, that we have a design staff of trained designers to help you. And how I do that with the customers, I will go into their home. You know, I want to talk to them. What colors do you like? What colors do you have already existing in the room? Sometimes that bases what we're going to work with color. So we start off with what is their floor coverings, what is their window coverings, or what are we changing? What colors do you like? And then we go from there. I like to mix patterns for interest. So I find the color that we're going to work with. We start off with a fabric. I like to mix stripes and plaids, solids, but I also have to feel out the customer and what they're comfortable with. I want this room to be created for them. I want them to feel comfortable in their home. So it's important to get into the customer's mind, find out how they live, what are they comfortable with, what is their family like. I could go in and I could decorate anyone's room the way I like it, but it's really important to make it reflect their personality. And so that's what we do here at the store. We try to make it a room that they just love going into, that is totally them, and they're very comfortable. Well, you know, they've always said that you're not supposed to put big pieces of furniture in small rooms, that you're not supposed to paint dark colors in small rooms, but we're finding that things have changed. You can take dark paint and put it on the walls. You can take larger furniture and create a bigger feeling room, all the way with what you do in the lighting. You do have to say somewhat in proportion, but we could take a big chair and ottoman and put it into a small room and forget the sofa and maybe put 2 chairs and ottomans in. Textures are important to your home. You want to mix texture for interest. If we had everything be a velvet, it would be very boring. It's important in your design element into your room to mix texture. You want soft fabrics. You might want something nubby. It's more interesting to mix texture into your room. When choosing a upholstery, what you want to do is find a good brand. I would look for something with a lifetime warranty frame, a lifetime warranty mechanism, and a lifetime warranty cushion. When a company is going to back it with lifetime, you know you're buying a well-made piece of furniture. Most fabrics are warranted for 1 year. High-end furniture to low-end, they won't give you a longer warranty than 1 year. So when picking out your fabric for the upholstery, you'd want to see what the fiber content is, if it's been treated with a soil shield, Teflon coating for stain resistant. You'd want to know how it rated, if it was a heavy rated fabric, medium wearing fabric, or a lightweight fabric. And most of your higher end furnitures will give you an H, M, or L rating, meaning heavy for H, M for medium, and L for light. And how they have come up with that rating is how that fabric has been run through what they call a rub test. And if it is light, they suggest that for adult families only. Medium would be something maybe more for your formal living room. And I would definitely choose heavy duty wear for a family room, something that's going to be used often. So I think those are some of the things that you want to look for in your upholstery. We sell Flexsteel, which we consider one of our higher end upholstery lines. You can flip a Flexsteel frame over. They're not going to have a dust cover covering their work. They want to show off their hardwood, their spring unit. You will find very few threads. You'll find very good workmanship on the Flexsteel. Most companies may offer more than one choice of cushion core. Some people like a very firm seat. Some people like a softer seat, and some even like some with a down wrap. And Flexsteel offers all three of those choices. And they're all a lifetime cushion core. They're a polyurethane, high resilient foam cushion, and then it is contoured with poly fibers wrapped around the cushion core to give it its shape. Also, I think it's important when you're looking at your furniture to make sure that the fabrics all are matching, that the patterns match, that you have reversible cushions. You can reverse your cushions and still have it match up to the back fabric. Even the higher ends not necessarily will always match the back side of the sofa. So you want to make sure that if your sofa is going to be sitting out in the middle of the room, that you pick a fabric that maybe that is not a plaid or something that doesn't have to be matched. Flexsteel does a pretty good job, but it's not always 100% guaranteed that the back of the sofa will match. There are many different kinds of wood out there. If it's a dining room table and you've got a young family and pine is your choice, that would be the one I would stay away from because pine is soft. You've got cherry wood, oak, pine, ash, birch, and they're all hardwoods except for pine. For your dining room table, it's important to find out that there's some kind of finish that they've applied to the top of the table to protect from water spills, moisture. You still need to get to it, but if they've got some sort of protection on the top of the table, you're not going to instantly get that water ring. Also, you might want to see how this piece of furniture is going to be used in your family. The high glossed finishes are very hard to upkeep. I mean, even when you get a lot of dust on it, there's dirt particles in it, and if you do not dust with the grain of the wood, you're going to scratch that high gloss finish. So gloss is very hard to maintain and keep looking for longevity. So I would maybe look for a medium to a low luster type of finish for a dining room table. It's easier to keep up. Again, I would be looking for a hard wood in a dining room table. Pine is soft, and if you want it to look distressed, and that's the look that you're trying to go for, then that would be okay. But pine will dent, it will scratch. So I would look for how you're going to use this piece of furniture. Mainly when someone is looking for how the quality of a chest of drawers are, they will look at the drawers. That's the main thing that you need to look for in the quality, because that is what's going to be used the most. You're pulling those drawers open. You need to look for how it's constructed. Is it dovetailed? Does it have a center glide? Does it have wood blocks for durability? So another way to find or tell if you're getting good quality is the drawer fronts solid, is the top solid, and again, look, you can look at the workmanship. Run your hands across it. Are you feeling splinters? Is it finished nicely? Society seems to be going more casual in the way they entertain and the way they design their homes. And probably one of our best-selling dining room groups right now is the Mission Oak. It is casual. You can work it with antiques. You can work it with Southwestern looks. You can work it with contemporary looks. So it's a very flexible style, and it's a little more casual than your formal Queen Anne cherry, and that seems to be the current styling that I'm seeing right now. And we carry one by Montana Furniture, and it's a very well-made piece of furniture. It's quarter sawn oak. It's all solid chairs, solid oak tabletop. It's got a bullet mar finish on it. This would be a great table for a young family. It could be an heirloom passed on because of the way they have constructed it. Choosing carpeting, I think it's important to find out what kind of look that you want to go for. There are Berbers, there's high and low carpets, plush, friezes, and in all of them there are high-end and lower-end carpets. And what you really want to look for is a good twist in the yarn, which you won't find in a Berber, of course, but you'll find it in all the other sort of carpets that I've talked about. The twist is the heat setting that they've put on applied to the fiber, and that is what's going to retain its shape. A lot of people think that you'll go and you feel the volume, the more volume that they feel, that's a better in carpet, but it can have a very low twist and it will mat down, crush, and look terrible. So what you want to look for is a good heat set twist, and then, you know, pile height, you can have a very dense low pile and still be a very durable carpet. So you want to look for the twist, the density of the carpet, and most of them will give you some sort of a guide on the back of the back of the carpeting, if it's for very lightweight wear, moderate wear, heavy wear, or very heavy wear. And those guides are very good for consumers because it's something easy that they can read on the back, and that will lend them to if that's the direction they should be going. I think that choosing carpet seems to be the trend is going neutral. Everything's got a very neutral palette, and neutrals are no longer what you think of as beige. Greens are very neutral. There's a very nice palette of greens out there, but going neutral seems to be the way to go because it's the piece that will last longer. You can build your room around the neutral, so you're always safe going with a neutral choice. But a lot of times people think of neutral, oh, I'm tired of beige and brown. And it doesn't have to be beige and brown. It can be gray, it can be greens, it can be beiges, but just something that many fabrics and textures and styling can go on. And that's what people seem to be striving for. And it's very important to buy a good pad to go along with that carpet. It is your foundation for your carpeting. It will give longer longevity to your carpeting. And especially on stairs, traffic areas, it's very important to choose a good pad. After the room's all put together and we've chosen the upholstery and the carpeting, then comes the accessories. The accessories are the finishing part of the room that really make the statement. And sometimes they're the most difficult thing to find. And you have to sometimes be patient and look for them. But the accessories set off the room, the right lamp, the right floral arrangement, the window treatments that you choose. These are all things that will make your home a home. The accessories are a very important part of the business. The accessories are 35% of the retail business right now.
Thank you for your attention. I hope we were able to help with some ideas about home furnishing and home decorating. Thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Jenny Junk.
And I'm Bill Junk.
We'd like to welcome you to a tour of our yard. You're going to be seeing a lot of things today, trees, plantings, flowers. We hope you enjoy it. We'll start here in the front yard. When we first bought this house, the house was built in 1978 and no one had lived in it, and nothing had been done with the yard. I looked at it in the spring of 1980, and there were no gutters on the house, so a lot of water had come off the roof and dripped down and created big gullies in the yard. It was just clay soil and was in very poor shape. Maybe one of the reasons why the house hadn't sold for a couple of years. But we saw the view, saw the possibilities, and decided to purchase the home. And so one of the first things that we had to do, since we moved in June, we had the summer to work on the yard and try to get that in shape. With a couple of small children, we needed play area outside. We needed to get rid of all that mud in the yard. The first thing that we had to do then was decide what we were going to need in the terms of soil. And what we worked out was an agreement with the builder that we would take some concrete chunks that he had left in the yard and have him not move those if he'd give us all the topsoil we wanted. So he came in, we had to get rid of the gutters, the gullies, by having gutters put on the house so that the water would drain off and not make these gullies underneath the eaves. And then we put the topsoil on, but before we put the topsoil on, we did amendments to the soil. Whenever you're landscaping, you really need to consider the kind of soil that you're working with. We lived at the University of Idaho, and they have a place where they have the dairy cattle. The dairy cattle have sawdust, and you can guess what else, and it makes for a really good soil amendment. So we had a pickup truck and had many, many loads, shoveling that in the summertime with the flies and distributing it over the entire third of an acre. But it really made a difference in how things grow here. We also added sand in some areas, particularly in the vegetable garden where we were going to grow potatoes, gypsum to break up some of the clay. Another thing we've also used is bark. Bark is both decorative and also can help to reduce weeds, which lowers maintenance, and also helps retain moisture. Design considerations: once you have your soil amended and you're ready to begin planting things, you have to decide what you're going to plant and lay it all out. And we're not landscape architects, but we decided we could get books and lay it out. One of the pieces of advice that we had gotten was to buy a hose and to lay that out to determine the shape of your grass. And we decided to do curved shapes of the grass. Once we had the grass laid out where the grass was going to go, we could select the various plantings, being limited at that point in time quite a bit by finances. So a lot of the plants that we bought were purchased at Kmart or purchased as we were able to afford them, with an idea of what we wanted in the long run. The slope we had to deal with because it was a slight slope from one side to the other. This house is built on a hill. So we had to determine how we were going to do that, and we determined that we wanted the grass to be relatively level and then to have a steeper slope where we could put evergreens in, which is what we've done here. We also needed enough usable area for the children to play in. A consideration that wasn't then but has since become one is the cost of water and how much time it takes to water. So now as we do changes to the garden, we are doing things that reduce the need for water. The edging that we've put around the grass here is a heavy plastic, and that helps both define the space, and it also helps in grass growing in through to the garden beds. And it gives us something to edge around. Eventually the plastic edging has been replaced by stacked stone in some areas, and we'll talk about that later. Another thing here on the other side of the front yard, you're going to notice this white picket fence by the roses. That fence was initially a split rail fence painted in gray to match the color of the house. But a gray split rail fence is not a very good background for colorful roses. So we decided to cut and design our own pickets and make a heavy picket fence painted white. You know the story of the old white picket fence and the roses, and that's the way we went with that. Another thing in the yard that you need to consider is how you select your trees. You need to think about the type of soil, how much moisture is in the soil. Things like birch, aspen, willow don't mind having their roots wet. Other kinds of trees wouldn't tolerate that as well. So we needed to consider what the tree needed. We also needed to consider what we needed. Were we planting this predominantly for shade, for privacy? Was it for the fact that it flowered in the spring? How big was it going to get? How much pruning was going to be needed to keep it in shape once it grew? And sometimes when you're planting things, you don't think about that because the trees are only an inch across. and you forget that they're going to get big. So you really need to look ahead if you're going to stay in that house a while to the size of the tree. We also did a number of evergreen shrubs, what we called mugo pines, junipers, which we have gradually eliminated. They're not all gone, but a lot of them are. I'm allergic to them. But they were inexpensive, and they grew fast. Gradually, we've replaced that with things such as perennials, because perennials are flowers that bloom season after season, compared to annuals, which you have to plant each year, and in our area would be killed by frost. You need to think about the planting zone that you're living in. We're going to look at the Sunset Garden book, and when you look at that book, you'll see that it talks about the different planting zones. One of the things that we have added over time, again, is we've had a little bit more money, and these hardier varieties have been developed, are azaleas and rhododendrons. When we initially purchased this house, we weren't aware of any varieties of either of those two that could handle potentially -10, -20 degrees. Since then, varieties have been developed, and so we have a number of azaleas throughout the yard and here in the front, and rhododendrons.
We have a large rose bed on the north side of the driveway, and roses grow very well in this climate. However, they do tend to get mildew and other diseases from time to time, depending on the weather and the environmental conditions. And so they're one of the few decorative plants that we have around that we routinely have to provide some spraying for. And so we use a combination of insecticide and fungicide on those. They also need to be pruned rather severely in the spring, cut down to probably about a foot or so, and then you get to thin out some of the canes, and they grow quite vigorously and will bloom all the way through until, in our area, usually into October, when we finally get a real hard-killing frost.
Another thing that you'll notice here out front is the number of things that we have in containers. We now do all of our annuals in containers. It's easier for me to get down and plant containers than it is to get down in the ground and plant things. So we have a lot of containers, but we have a lot of seasonal bloom then from the annuals. Here on the maple tree, we've hung 3 baskets as that tree got big enough to do that. That's a great way to have some color out in the middle of the front yard. And also shade. You need to consider, are you going to have sun or shade when you have annuals? In this case, we have tuberous begonias, which are shade-loving plants. As we have, again, redone things in the yard, we've put down landscaping cloth. That landscaping cloth, we get usually a pretty heavy-duty one, commonly because we don't want to replace it. It's a lot of work to clear off a bed, particularly if you have bark on it. Get rid of all the weeds and put down landscaping cloth. But the payoff is tremendous. When I think how many hours I have saved in weeding in a yard this large by having that landscaping cloth down, it's well worth the time. It lets the moisture through, it means you have to water less, and keeps the weeds down. So it's just been great. This maple tree has to have all the leaves raked up in the fall. One thing about maple trees is they have very large leaves and they make great piles, and they're great fun to jump in for kids. But most years we have at least 17 garbage bags crammed full of leaves that we take down to the recycling center. That may not sound like a lot, but if you're really packing them in, that's a lot of raking. When you look in the backyard, you see the cherry trees. Cherries put out a lot of leaves too. So all of that requires some maintenance. So trees sound great, but they do if they're deciduous. In other words, they lose their leaves in the wintertime. They're going to require that you clean up after them.
We used to have a small strip of grass along the driveway and the sidewalk that comes into the house, and it was collecting a lot of weeds and was hard to keep watered, and so it turned brown most of the time in the summer. So this year we decided to remove it and to go ahead and put in sort of a simulated stream bed next to the driveway. And what we had to do to construct that was to remove approximately 4 to 6 inches of dirt and dispose of that, which has been piled around in a couple of different places in the yard for future use. Then we put down some landscape cloth, and we used a high-grade commercial cloth. The intent of that is to keep any kind of weeds from beginning to grow in the dirt that's underneath there and then coming up. And then put in river rock, various sizes, and then added to that some rocks that we had collected from various places in our travels to make it look a little bit more like an actual stream bed. And we'll probably add a little bit of sand and some other kinds of material as we go along here. It's still in the process of construction. We haven't yet decided how we want to continue it across to the south side of the house, and so we'll be working on that here in the future. We have lilacs planted on both the south side of the house and the north side of the house, and also in a few other little places around. Lilacs are sort of an indigenous plant almost in this area. They grow very well. They last a long time. They can get quite large. You see some that are the size of large bushes and some that grow as large as some small trees, depending on how they're pruned and the varieties that they are. But they have a very nice fragrant bloom in the springtime, so they're one of the first things that comes out and adds some color back into the yard. They don't need much care. In fact, they probably do better when you kind of neglect them a little bit, so we don't do anything to water or fertilize on a regular basis. Just let nature take care of that. They make a good foundation planting on the south side of the house, where we're really just trying to obscure a very plain looking set of siding that just goes from foundation to roof. Around on the south side of the house, we've constructed a series of steps, and again, this is an area where we've reused some of the concrete that was left around in the yard here when we first purchased the house, and we built up some retaining walls and also made some steps out of some pieces. It's one of the areas that it doesn't have a great deal of visual appeal, but it's functional. It holds the dirt back and gives us access from around the house in the front to the backyard. One of my ideals in terms of future work in the yard will be to modify this area and actually create a water feature with a small waterfall and possibly a pond next to the patio that we're constructing this summer. We've investigated the possibility of adding a watering system as an automatic sprinkler system to the house. We had a person come in from, I believe, Lewiston a few years ago and made an estimate, did a design and that sort of stuff, and this was actually probably almost 10 years ago. At that time, they recommended that we have a 5-zone system, and a zone is an area that can be independently controlled. So there might have been a zone for the front and several zones in the back, because we do have the multiple layers and different kinds of plantings that would need different types of watering. And at that time, almost 10 years ago, they estimated that it would be about a $5,000 job. Now that sounded a little bit high to us at that time, and so we decided not to do it. We still haven't done it, but it's also one of the things that we're considering for a future project.
Here on the front deck, we need to do some work on this decking, and we eventually plan to replace the decking with Trex decking, which you'll see on our back deck when we talk about the construction of that. But what we have done out here is add a lot of things for color. The hanging baskets are really fun to do. I generally line my hanging baskets with sphagnum peat moss. I really like the look of it. I try to get larger baskets because the smaller the basket, the more often you have to water, which means we either have to pay someone to come water every day, get larger baskets, or get a watering system, and that's cost prohibitive. So generally we have gone to fairly large size containers over time since they can handle water every few days. The front deck is shaded from the afternoon sun, so it's a great place to put plants that like a lot of light but aren't particularly heat tolerant. So as you can see in this one large planter, we have a lot of impatiens and ageratum, pansies, begonias, all kinds of things that like the shade but are very colorful. we come here in the afternoon when the heat of the sun hits the back deck, but the back deck has the best view and the most room. One thing you want to think about when you're planning your landscaping is you need to look at your neighbor's landscaping. It's interesting that we live in an area that's on a hill, view lots. And the first thing people do is put in trees, and then the trees grow, and pretty soon your neighbor's tree is blocking your view. And maybe our trees are blocking our neighbor's view. The great thing is we have good relationships with people on both sides of us, and I'll just say to my next door neighbor, you know, that tree's getting where we can't see Paradise Ridge anymore. Do you mind if we come over and prune it? We'll clean up after it. And he says yes, and we agree on about how much will come off. Neighbor on the other side's done the same thing. We've asked them to let us know if something we've planted is blocking one of their favorite views. So you keep a nice relationship going as you try to keep things in size. We talked a bit more about tree selection and the water and the space needs. Another thing also to consider in trees is we have a number of fruit trees on this yard. We have an apple tree, we have 2 cherry trees, 2 pear trees, peach tree, apricot tree. We've had a variety of other kinds of fruits too, but they're both decorative and they're functional. We get a very good production on the cherries most years. For shade, we've had predominantly maples and birches, and for flowering, we have flowering crab apples in several places in the yard. We had tried dogwoods at one time. Dogwoods are beautiful. Both pink and white dogwoods are just lovely, but they're marginal here. And by marginal, as are peaches, that means if we get a very cold frost, a cold frost that's maybe 20 degrees below, they can't handle that. So we planted dogwoods and lost them. We've planted a lot of things and lost them. Fortunately, we were able to find other things that then will take their place.
Well, when we planted the trees and the bushes, things were very small, and of course, as time goes by, they get bigger. So probably at about the 10-year point, from the time we started the landscaping of the house, we began having to do some pruning. The maple tree out in the front yard is one that I have tried to keep relatively in check. It would get very, very large and overhang the house, and we'd have a lot more tree there than we'd really like to have. So it gets a fairly significant pruning in the spring of the year, very early spring before any of the sap is moving. And I probably take as much as 5 or 6 feet off of it each year, and it does actually grow about that much. We've also made some discoveries in the course of living with our plantings. We had a grove of aspens develop. We planted 1 aspen tree, and aspens like water, and it was planted in a fairly wet bank between our house and our neighbor's house that's up the hill from us. And they spread through roots, and the aspens have actually gone across their property and down and around and back and that sort of thing. We did have one of the larger ones. I think actually the original tree died a few years ago, and we had to take that out. So we had to go at that one with a chainsaw and make sure that it came down in the right spot, and then chop it up and get rid of it. We also periodically end up taking out some of the newer shoots that are coming up from the root system just to keep from having aspens everywhere. So that's something to keep in mind that we didn't really realize when we first planted that tree, was that it was going to spread all over the place. We also probably made a mistake when we initially planted a blue spruce tree, and it was on the southeast corner of the house, probably about 6 to 8 feet away from the house itself. And again, a small tree. It didn't seem like it would be problematic, and kind of thought we'd be able to prune it back so we could walk around it and that sort of thing. But it grew and grew, and it probably reached 20 or 25 feet and was just getting too large. And so that was another tree that we decided to remove, and got after it with a chainsaw, and it was down in the front yard and chopped up and hauled away. We've since replaced it with a weeping cherry tree in that area and some other smaller plantings that I think we can kind of keep in check. That does sort of bring to mind the fact that with a yard such as ours, we do create a fair amount of yard waste that we have to deal with. And not having an area sufficiently large that we could devote to composting on our own, what we do is haul our stuff to the city's recycling center, where they do take yard waste and it's taken to the landfill area and composted and then made available to people to use. We probably take the equivalent of, I guess 3 or 4 pickup truck loads of stuff probably in the early spring when we're doing the major pruning in the yard. And then if we're not in a pruning cycle, then we probably generate about a garbage can or so of dead flowers and weeds and other kinds of things that we do on a sort of a weekly basis in a maintenance mode. We don't generally take the grass clippings and collect those. We use those as sort of an organic fertilizer, just let it go back onto the yard and decompose.
We are both very much flower fans. I love the color of flowers, the texture of flowers, and those are things in the garden you want to consider, things besides just color. You want to think about texture. And so we start off the year, we are in an area of winter, and when you have long winters and you've come from a warm climate, you want signs of spring or color in your yard. So one of the things that we did is we have about 400 or 500 bulbs planted throughout the yard. We've had more than that, but some have died off. They've gotten too much water or something has happened. Crocuses come out first. The next thing we have are some tulips. We also have daffodils in the front and the back, in the middle of the yard. Hyacinths, these little grape hyacinths, which spread on their own. It blew over from our neighbor's yard. Now we have them everywhere, and I love them. The lilacs then come on. Then the irises come on, and these are giant irises. North of us, there used to be a place called Palouse Hills Iris Garden, and a couple from Arizona ran that, and they displayed hundreds and hundreds of irises, and you could pick out them in bloom, and they'd send them to you afterwards to plant. Then the azaleas and rhododendrons come on after that. Then the oriental poppies come on after that. Hostas that we have here in the shaded area are not flowering for very long, but the leaves themselves have color, so we use that. The roses bloom all summer. Potentilla, the annuals, all of those things bloom all summer. But when we hit fall, in this area, we have some things that don't bloom until fall. The rose of Sharon and the hibiscus, they're both in the hibiscus family, bloom in the fall. These butterfly bushes will bloom in the fall. We also tend to plant mums, and these 3 bushes in front of the foundation in the front here are what's called burning bush. They're green now, but in the fall when the cold snap hits, they'll turn bright red. Well, you can see some pictures here of what the backyard looked like when we bought it, and I think it was rather daunting when we looked at that. And we looked at the slope, the terrible clay soil, the big gullies that had been washed, the concrete laying everywhere, and it was huge and just muck. So, we did the front yard first. The challenge in the backyard, we didn't hit till about 81, 82, trying to decide what to do. I remember renting rototiller and then one of those little cat things that I was so afraid my husband was going to flip over in because of the slope. But you had to have something to muscle that. You only can lift so many shovelfuls of clay soil. It's too heavy. So we rented some equipment and were able to bring it around the side of the house. That's one of the reasons why we have a ramp. You'll notice when we go to the front to the backyard, we had to have a way to get equipment, wheelbarrows, whatever, down to the lowest parts of our yard. So we have grass ramping that goes down. We also have steps that you can take, but we didn't want just steps or else we wouldn't be able to get equipment down there. So we used the concrete. They built this tall retaining wall with concrete, but then that wasn't enough, and it isn't particularly attractive. So we got many tons of black basalt from the local rockery and brought those in by pickup load. Kids helped us, neighbors and friends helped us, and we built these series of retaining walls. And you can see in this picture when I was initially planting all these plantings, how small they were and then how large they are now. We also had to put those in because we didn't want the steep slopes. I didn't want to mow a steep slope. And so our grass is fairly level. It's corrected drainage problems that we've had. We used railroad ties for edging. And we were looking at wind and sun considerations when we planted things. We had to really think, this backyard faces west. And because it faces west and we're on the top of a hill, it gets a lot of wind. It gets a lot of heat in the summertime, a lot of cold in the wintertime. So we had to do things that would handle both the wind and the sun. In the upper backyard here, you can see we had to put up this picket fence to protect the rhododendrons. Rhododendrons do not like wind. And so you can spray them with a compound called wilt-proof that helps them retain moisture. So we have this flowering crabapple to shade them and the picket fence to provide protection from the wind. And then they do quite well there. The weeping cherry was initially a large mountain ash tree, and our neighbor said it was blocking all the sun from his bonsai collection, which was on his side yard. So we said, no problem, we'll chop it down. He's been so good to us that way. So we chopped that down and then did this weeping cherry that will stay fairly small, and we prune it so it doesn't get up high and block the sun from his bonsai. One of the areas that we've done recently is this raised stacked stone bed around the back of the house. And when we did that, we had to decide what we wanted to plant there. It was wonderful to have some shade in the backyard because prior to that, we had to only plant things that were very heat and sun tolerant. So under the deck, we've planted these hostas and vinca, rhododendrons, azaleas that can handle the shade. In fact, they get almost no sun under there, and they're doing quite well.
Last year, we reached a point where the deck that we had on the back of the house had deteriorated enough that it was probably of concern to us from a safety standpoint. And so we took it down and replaced it with a much more substantial and, let's say, properly constructed deck. We decided that we wanted one that was going to be low maintenance, in fact, as close to zero maintenance as possible. And that influenced our decisions on the materials that we used. It has a what's called a Trex deck surface, which is a composite material of recycled milk containers and wood fibers, and so it has a very long life and is not going to be subject to rotting and cracking and splitting like conventional wood products would be concerned. Also for the understructure, I decided to use pressure-treated lumber, and pressure-treated lumber has chemicals actually forced under pressure into it as a wood preservative, and so they will last much longer than conventional lumber would. As far as design of the deck was concerned, we got a couple of books with design ideas and construction details. One by Ortho called Deck Plans I used because it had some tables in there that would give me information about size of lumber and spacing of support members and various kind of construction details that needed to be considered. The deck itself is built with 2x6s and 2x10s, again pressure treated lumber, 4x4 posts. The posts are supported on concrete pillars that we drilled some great big holes and poured them full of concrete for footings. Decided to use bolts to secure things together. One of the problems that we'd had in previous decks is that things that are nailed tend to come loose after time, so all of the main structural members are bolted together. The deck surface itself is screwed down with sort of a self-hiding screw, and so we won't have to worry about nails popping back up out of the deck surface and tripping over those or getting hurt on them or anything like that. In the last few years, there's been quite a sort of a revolution in engineered concrete products. Started seeing large retaining walls built out of what they called keystone blocks and things like that a few years ago, and they've actually sort of migrated the product lines into stuff that's usable for kind of decorative purposes around homes and things. And we built a number of beds, actually replaced existing structures in our yard, and we're using something called a stack stone. And the particular model that we're using here, or product, is called a Roman stack stone, and it's a rustic concrete product. It's poured into a little form, like a sort of like a partial wedge shaped, and then after they're hard and dry, they throw a bunch of them in a tumbler and tumble them to get sort of a rough edge on them. They're relatively easy to work with. Each one probably weighs about 15 pounds, so they're small compared to some of the 70 and 80 pound blocks that you may see, again, for commercial use. The biggest trick to building a wall with these stack stones is making sure that you get the first course set properly. That's the base set of stones that are going in whatever direction you want to go. You need to dig down into the soil, remove the dirt, create a little channel, then fill that channel with crushed rock, probably in the range of 3 or 4 inches would be good, and make sure that that's level. And then put the first layer of stones down and make sure that they get nice and level. These particular stones that we're using have a little channel locking system so that you can stack stones on top of stones up to about 5 or 6 high, and they'll stay in place because of the little channel that's in them. So we're using those products now in a number of different places in the yard to construct raised flower beds and sort of add a little more finished look. These concrete products have also become available for use in constructing walkways and patios, and we've done some of that this year in the backyard. We removed a large concrete patio that we had put in our initial landscaping, and over the years some of the soil that it was resting on settled a little bit, and the patio cracked, and it wasn't really very attractive. So a year ago we broke that up and hauled it away, and then this summer we've been in the process of constructing a replacement for a portion of it. This is also a fairly straightforward process that anyone who wants to get a little bit dirty and do these kinds of things can actually do themselves. What you need to do is remove the dirt from the area where you want the patio to be, fill in with about 4 inches of crushed rock. And then it's pretty important to make sure that crushed rock gets compacted and leveled. And so we've used a plate compactor, which we've rented from a local equipment rental place. It has a little gas motor on it. It vibrates this plate and it packs the rock down. On top of the rock you put a 1-inch layer of sand, and then make sure that that's nice and smooth, and then on top of the sand you lay the paving stones. The particular arrangement that we have used for our patio has required that we actually cut some of the stones, and I have a diamond blade for my chop saw so that I can actually cut them. It makes it fairly easy to work with those. At the end of laying the stones, you cover the entire area with sand and run the plate compactor over it again to vibrate sand down between the stones, and that sets them in place. Around the edges of the patio, you'll notice that a couple of places where it's exposed still because we're in construction, there's an edging piece that we do put in there to hold the stones in place so that they don't eventually slide a little bit and open up bigger cracks between itself and an adjacent stone.
In planning this area where the rock walls are here in the back, we had to consider what we wanted to plant. And there was a person on the College of Agriculture who was in landscape on horticulture and had a garden center not too far out of town. And so we went to him and talked to him about what we might put in there. And he suggested things like the snowball plant, which you can see in this picture in full bloom, bridlesweet, spirea, forsythia, which blooms fairly early in the spring. And again, they're all sequenced in bloom. It goes from forsythia to snowball to spirea. By the time those are done, the roses have come into bloom. We also have many different perennials. A lot of them got buried because these plantings and bushes have gotten so big, but they're under there. They're designed to cascade over the rocks. I have about 8 different varieties of thyme. Woolly thyme in particularly makes a nice soft pad and forms over the rocks. Again, we've got color. We have oranges and yellows and all different colors that will cycle in here throughout the growing season. We have what we call our lower backyard, and in this lower backyard, it's bordered on one side by the picket fence that you see there. That picket fence, because the back side of it faces west, needs painting more. And in fact, it needs painting right now. I don't see it, and so I'm not as motivated to paint it, but I'm definitely going to have to do it from a maintenance standpoint. That is the end of our yard. That's our property line. However, you'll notice the grass is mowed behind that, and we maintain that. Just because the people below, their house is about 40 feet below, and they're not going to bring a lawnmower up that steep hill and mow this, so we generally maintain it. It keeps the ground from cracking and from erosion and things happening to it. We have 3 different areas here. We have the north section, the middle section, and the lower section in the south, and I want to talk about the north section first. You can see what it looked like back in 1985. We had very small trees, and we're using this as a vegetable garden. And my daughter still misses the fact that we had corn growing there because our cat would always go in there and lie under the corn, and she misses seeing that. But what we discovered is it was great fun when the kids were small to plant the vegetables and they could see them grow, but it was a lot more work. So once they moved away, we decided, we need to start moving this toward lower maintenance. So we put in perennials. So now this is a perennial area with the bird bath here, a couple containers for annuals, this arch with all of the roses on it. We have hundreds of irises in here. We have tulips, delphiniums, different things that are going to cycle through. So we have constant color from about April on until the fall when the asters come out, and that's usually in September. We've also got some paving stones in here, and you can see these are not as nicely done as the patio. That's before we learned about packing down a gravel underneath it and putting some edging on to hold them from spreading. So we know we're going to have to redo this, but I'm not real motivated to do it anytime soon. Some of the things that we have in this north area also are delphiniums. Delphiniums are very tall and spiky, and since this area would not be visible if plants were low, because it's very low in the yard, I tried to pick perennials that would grow rather tall. The asters grow about 3 or 4 feet tall, the delphiniums about 3 or 4 feet tall, columbine grows several feet tall, and the irises, lilies, all of those things are fairly tall. This section is divided from the middle section of our lower backyard by this long trellis. We decided to sort of put this part of the garden into zones or spaces. This was sort of my English garden area, separated by a trellis from the next area. We decided to plant trumpet vine on this trellis because it really is supposed to attract hummingbirds. I haven't seen one yet. Maybe we need to put in a hummingbird feeder, but this will eventually be completely covered by that and providing a separate area in the garden. This part of the garden, we've done this arched walkway and also carried through the arched with, to me, what almost looks like a pagoda in the small boxwoods. Then we have a number of annuals here. This area does get some shade from these 2 large cherry trees. In the south section, this is where we've put in our grape arbor. My intent was not to harvest grapes, but Concord grapes. If you've ever smelled Concord grapes when the sun hits them, it just smells wonderful. And so I wanted to have these grapes growing over it and be able to sit there in the summertime and just smell all of that and look out over town at the view. So we built, my husband built, this great trellis and arbor. And when we did that, we discovered a couple of things. First, we thought Concord grapes, they turned out to be a green grape that really doesn't have much fragrance when the sun hits it, but it does provide shade overhead. However, it will not provide late afternoon shade because the sun is coming in at a different angle. Right now we've got grass thrown all over here because we've pulled it out of the upper yard, but normally I have a glider that sits here and I can look out over town at the view, and so I really like it. Behind the grape arbor we have raspberries. These raspberries have been very prolific, but raspberries are another thing in the garden that cycles. We've had these in here about 15 years. In the last few years we have to keep replacing them because raspberries have a certain life and then they'll die off. We have several different varieties, and over time, now you can see right now there's tons of flowers on the raspberries, and we should get a great crop on the raspberries this year. We hope you enjoyed your tour of our yard and that you learned some things and maybe got some ideas for things you could use in your home.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Kevin Peterson, co-owner of Howard Hughes Appliance here in Moscow, and we'd like to spend a little bit of time with you this morning talking about the new trends in appliances available in the marketplace today. We'll start with washers and dryers, we'll move on to refrigeration, we'll talk about dishwashers and the new trends in the cooking products available today. We'll talk about how these products can save you money, they'll save energy, save water, as well as how they'll make your life a little bit easier. One of the major places today where energy efficiency has really changed in the last 5 or 6 years would be in washers and dryers. Standard top-load washers use 45 to 50 gallons of water in every load. That means you have to heat that water, that means you have to dispose of that water, it means you have to pump it out of the ground. What we're trying to do today in the industry is to lower that amount down to where we're as little as 25 gallons now. We see top-load machines as well as front-load machines where it would cost $80 to $90 a year to run those machines. That's the electricity for the machines as well as heating the water and everything else, to where we're down to about $21. And we can achieve that also with more efficiency. The clothes get cleaner. The clothes are not beat up as much by an agitator that we see in the conventional top-load machine, as well as the dryers take less time to dry because the washers are actually spinning the water out at a higher speed, taking more water out of it, and thereby the dryer doesn't take as long to dry. Here in front of me, we have a display that shows how much water is saved in every load of laundry over a regular top-load machine. We're seeing today, at least in our store, where 1 out of every 3 machines is a water-saving machine, even though the price of that machine is probably anywhere from a third to twice as much money to buy. How we can demonstrate the energy efficiency of a new front-load washer or energy-efficient top-load washer is if a family of 4 was doing between 7 and 10 loads of laundry a week, they can save between $80 and $120 a year in energy cost just by switching to a new machine. It's the thing about the new machines is they're more convenient. They clean your clothes, as we said before, better. They spin them out drier, saving dry time on the dryer, and they're gentle on the clothes. Those are the 4 main things about a front-load washer or an energy-efficient washer. The reason I'm spending most of the time talking about the washers is the large amount of money that's actually spent heating the water in a washer. That's where the costs come from. There are some efficiencies made in dryers today over what they used to be, but things have not changed very much. There's a motor, there's a heat element, it turns over, the clothes get dry. Where we see shorter dry times, and as an example, the Fisher & Paykel washer, which is actually from New Zealand, the dryer will dry in the amount of time it takes the washer to wash because the clothes come out almost feeling dry. One other thing we can talk about is the difference between a gas and electric dryer. Now, in the Northwest, gas, even though it's been used to heat houses for years and years, is not used near as much as a gas dryer. The reason why is the efficiencies between electric and gas are not enough for people to want to spend the $50 more than it takes to get a gas dryer. So most of the time what we're seeing is an electric dryer really the only time people will purchase gas is when they've built the new house and it's plumbed to where the gas dryer is, and then it doesn't cost that much. But if you have to plumb it and buy a new dryer, it's usually not worth it. The efficiencies between the two are not that much different. The next thing I'd like to talk about is dishwashers. The big changes that have been made in dishwashers, and it's really been done in the last 5 years, has been in the introduction of low water usage dishwashers. Most companies out there, they've pretty much changed their water efficiencies from, 10 years ago, it was 14 gallons for a load of wash. Today it's down to about 7. The way they do it is they only use 2 gallons per wash, and instead of flooding the dishwasher with water, they basically just soak the dishes. They use a higher temperature, anywhere from 140 degrees to 160 degrees. At those temperatures, they break down fats, they get to the eggs that are on your dishes, spaghetti, things like that. The second thing that's new now is quietness. If you have an old dishwasher in your house, you're probably used to not talking on the telephone when you've got the dishwasher on. Most dishwashers today, that's not true. You do not have to do that. Bosch is a dishwasher that's from Germany. When it's turned on, sometimes you don't even know it's on. We're also seeing stainless steel on the interior of dishwashers. Most people are used to porcelain in the past, or plastic, which has been used for quite a few years. The drawback to porcelain was its cost, as well as disposing of it in a landfill. You cannot separate porcelain from the metal that it's bound to. So you basically throwing a whole dishwasher away and it cannot be recycled. And that's something to point out. All dishwashers, not all dishwashers, all appliances today are recycled. They aren't thrown into a landfill and just left to rot. They're actually put into a pile. Recyclers come through, they pick them up, and they basically crunch them up and turn them into new products. Dishwashers, like we said, used to use 14 gallons. Now they're down to 7. Yearly costs used to be $50 to $60 for heating of that water, as well as heated dry, which is what most dishwashers use. That's to dry the dishes. If you look at a Bosch dishwasher, it doesn't even have a heating element in it. There's no element in the bottom, thereby it just dries by convection. There's so much heat in the stainless steel exterior that it will suck the water off the dishes onto the side of the dishwasher and goes to the bottom, and that's how it does its drying. To wear a dishwasher today is about $20 if you have a gas water heater. That's the most you use for electricity for a whole year. The other thing that I'll say about dishwashers is people should use their dishwashers more. Let the dishwasher do the work. And that's another way to save some energy. What people will do is clean their dishes too well before they put them in the dishwasher, and you're using all that hot water at the tap. It's a little known fact that it takes enzymes from the food to work with the soap to break the soap down. If it's sterile environment in the dishwasher, you end up with soap in suspension. It does not clean, and that's a reason why people's dishwashers don't clean when they say, well, I clean it all before I put it in. We tell people 2 things. Don't clean your dishes, make sure your water's hot at the tap, and your dishwasher will do a great job. And that's anywhere from spending $300 for a dishwasher up to $1,000. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about cooking appliances. The first type is the coil range. It's been around for 50 or 60 years. Has not really changed very much. It basically just heats the coil red hot and heats things up. There's not much to say about it. They're efficient, they work very well, and they're the least costly of the ranges. Generally today they're all self-cleaning. Self-cleaning is pretty much everything in our store, everything that we sell. And self-cleaning, one word about it, if done correctly, and correctly means take the racks out of the oven before you self-clean, When you're done, all you'll have to do is use a rag and just wipe out the dust that's in the bottom of the range. It works that well. The second type is the clean top ranges, and they're just as they sound, clean top or smooth top. You do not see the element. The element is actually below the glass top. The glass top is usually made by a company called Saran, which is out of Germany. It is heat tempered. It's very, very hard to break. The thing that makes a clean top range so nice is the fact that it heats up in about 8 seconds. If you turn it on, it will glow red hot in about 8 seconds. So things will heat up a little faster. Number two is cleanup. If things spill, they don't spill down into a drip pan and down into the middle of the range. It'll stay on the top. When it's cooled off, you use a paste-like substance to clean it off. It should stay clean for 20 years. The third type of ranges are gas ranges. Gas is the more on or off cooking appliance, meaning when gas is on, it's on, when it's off, it's off. It's what the real cook would like to use. That's why the restaurants use them. The BTUs, which is how you measure the amount of heat that the burners put out, will go anywhere from 9,000 BTUs to 15,000, and 15,000 on the high end is the same thing a restaurant uses. When we talk about gas ranges, the new thing is self-cleaning, which was not available in gas until probably the last 5 or 6 years. They weren't able to generate enough heat, and self-cleaning is about 1,000 degrees in the oven to burn off everything that's on the side of the oven. So now we're seeing gas make kind of a renaissance or come back because people do not have to lose out on any of the creature comforts of their range. Really, there's only 2 types of ovens. They're all electric ovens most of the time, but we're seeing what we call a thermal oven, which is just your regular oven, or convection. Convection is what restaurants have used for a long time. Effectively, it's a fan in the back of the oven. It blows the air around inside the oven, eliminating hot spots. In a standard oven, the temperature can vary anywhere from 40 to 50 degrees from the bottom to the top. That's why when you put a rack of cookies or 2 racks of cookies in, the bottom one is cooked differently than the top one. If we go to a convection oven, we will eliminate those hot spots, and they even go further with a convection oven. Is they'll have 3 racks, and you can put 3 racks of cookies in that oven, and every single one of them will come out the same. Now, cost is a factor. When you go to a convection oven, it will add $100 to $150 to a range over what a regular one would cost. Convection is available in gas as well as electric. Some gas ranges will have a gas top and an electric oven. Those are called dual fuel ranges. That's what we find in the real high-end professional ranges from Viking or DCS or Dacor. But in the standard ranges, a gas range is going to have a gas oven. Speaking a little bit about cost, the entry-level coil range that's a manual clean range is anywhere from $200 to $300. A self-cleaning coil top range, anywhere from $300 to $500. Smooth top ranges anywhere from $500 to over $1,000. And gas ranges from $350 to, at the high end, $5,000 to $10,000 if you go to one of these high-end stainless steel built-in Viking or Dacor ranges. In a gas range, there's actually 2 types of ignition systems. That is how the burners are started. Most ranges today are electronic ignition, meaning that they're plugged into the wall into 110, and to start them, you just turn the oven on to light, and a little spark starts, and the gas comes out, and it starts automatically. Pilot light ignitions are only available anymore on the very, very low-end ranges, which generally are only put into people's their cabins and things like that, where maybe power would go out. Because the drawback to having electronic ignition, You can always light the top manually, but you can't light the oven. You can't get to it. A couple of things also to speak of in the cooking products. It's not as popular, but you do have the availability of wall ovens. That is an oven that's in a wall, or cooktops, and a cooktop is obviously the cooking surface that sits in a countertop. We see that in newer homes and some of the older ones. The benefits of it is it frees up space in the kitchen. The drawback to it is that you end up spending a little bit more money because you're buying 2 units instead of 1. But if somebody is making a very nice new kitchen, the cooktop wall oven configuration is a very nice way to go. The last major thing that I'd like to talk about today would be refrigeration. In the last 10 years, probably more in the last 5 years, the energy efficiency of the refrigerators has increased dramatically. As an example, a refrigerator, a used refrigerator that may be 20 years old, would use upwards of $200 worth of electricity today if in your house. That same refrigerator built as of June this year, which will have new U.S. energy guides, will be as little as $50. So you're seeing you could buy a new refrigerator today and save $150 a year just in energy savings just by buying a new refrigerator. The way that a refrigerator achieves their energy efficiency over the older refrigerators is in a couple of different ways. One, more insulation, or we should probably not say more insulation, more efficient insulation in the walls. Because actually the walls of the refrigerators are not as thick as they used to be. That's one way that we're getting more space. Say a refrigerator is a specific size. We can get more usable space in that refrigerator today than we used to. But by using more efficient insulation as well as more efficient compressors. What you'll find is a compressor today will turn on and off more often. It is a smaller motor. And by turning on and off more often, it will save electricity. We also see the thermostats inside a refrigerator. When you open the door, if it can feel as little as a half a degree in temperature rise from that warm air coming into the refrigerator, it will turn a fan on, and not the compressor. It'll turn a fan, thereby drawing cold air from the freezer into the refrigerator. That fan uses less electricity than the compressor does, thereby saving money that way. That being said, there are 3 types of refrigerators available. The traditional top mount refrigerator, or the freezer on the top, the side-by-side that we're used to with the freezer on the left and the refrigerator on the right, and a category that's not new, but it's made a comeback in the last 5 or 10 years, and that's the refrigerator that has the freezer on the bottom. In cost, the freezer on the top is the least expensive. It still sells the most, and because of the fact that it sells the most, that's where the price is the least. All the refrigerators today use about the same amount of electricity, anywhere from $40 to $70 a year, as opposed to, like we spoke to before, of up to $200 20 years ago. When we get into a customer who comes off the street who's building a house or remodeling, side-by-sides are very, very popular. They have the ice and water through the door. The convenience of that is what people want. They're willing to pay a premium for it because a side-by-side will range anywhere from $800 to $2,000. They are the largest appliance. I mean, they're 3 feet wide and they're about 72 inches tall, so they don't fit in every household. The third category is the freezer on the bottom. I put in my personal preference here. The bottom freezer to me makes the most sense. We get into our refrigerator 5 times for every time we get into our freezer. So why shouldn't the refrigerator be right in front of you? There is one drawback to that. A bottom freezer refrigerator has to work a little bit harder because it has to blow the cold air from the freezer up to the refrigerator. That makes a bottom freezer slightly less energy efficient in the long run than the other refrigerators. The major trends that we can talk about refrigerators, it will be the same across the three types. We still see wire rack shelves in the refrigerator, not near as much as we used to. Now we're seeing glass shelves. We're seeing what we call sealed glass shelves, which means if somebody spills a glass of milk on that shelf, it doesn't drain all the way to the bottom of the refrigerator. You can pull that shelf out and clean it. We're seeing humidity-controlled crispers where if you put your fruits and vegetables, they'll last up to a week longer inside without having to throw it out like we have in the past. We have deli drawers where cold air from the freezer is coming directly into the refrigerator, keeping your meats and your cheeses a week or two longer than they used to. The warranties that are on most of the products, and this is across the board, whether it be refrigeration, washers, dryers, ranges, dishwashers, the standard in the industry today generally will give you 1 year parts and labor on the product. Varying products will give you a longer warranty, generally for parts only. People think that their appliances are going to last forever, and unfortunately they don't. The Maytag man from the years past, where he talked about not having to fix his Maytag, well, it's not as true as it used to be. But it's also a case where I talked to a lady who bought a Maytag washer in 1967 and she paid $367. I can sell you a washer today for $367. It is not going to last 30 years. There's a reason why they don't last as long. One, we won't pay that price, like a car has gone up in price. And number two, they're made out of a lot of plastics. And those type of products, because of that, we're seeing washers lasting anywhere from 10 to 20 years, dryers 10 to 20 years. Dishwashers, the average is about 12 years. Refrigerators, the average is about 12 to 14 years. And I know that comes as a shock from people who've probably seen their parents have a Maytag washer for 30 years, but unfortunately we're not seeing that near as much anymore. The one thing that we probably haven't talked about as much about yet, it's the high-end appliances that are available from Viking in the ranges, DCS, Dacor, in built-in refrigeration, which Sub-Zero is the main name, but Viking also makes some. These products, be perfectly honest, they do some things better for you, but most of the time a customer will buy one of these because they look good. As an example, the Sub-Zero refrigerator is just as deep as your counter. It does not stick out as far as a general refrigerator, but they have stainless steel fronts on them. I don't want to say it's a status symbol, but it probably is. They will last a lot longer. They're built very, very well. They may last for 25, 30 years, but to buy a Sub-Zero refrigerator is anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. Far outside most people's price range. Same with a Viking range. You can pay as little as $3,000 or as high as $10,000. Thank you for letting me spend a little bit of time with you today about the new trends in appliances. And hopefully the next time you're in the marketplace for a new appliance, you'll have some new information to make a more informed decision when you do need to buy something.